Listen closely. Take a breath, because a major update just broke in the Lynette Hooker investigation, and it completely shatters the official narrative we have been fed.
If you think you know this story, throw that out, because the feds just made a massive move that changes everything.
The Coast Guard did not just impound Brian Hooker's 46-foot sailboat, Soulmate. They seized the vessel and towed it 100 miles south to Fort Lauderdale, shrink-wrapping the yacht and locking it down as an active crime scene for trial preservation.
All of Brian's excuses about the howling winds and broken oar,
and losing his wife to a violent sea.
This massive federal escalation proves that investigators believe his story is pure garbage.
They are treating that sailboat like a murder weapon, locking down microscopic evidence before the grand jury indicts. Before we dissect the forensic evidence, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel and do not look away for a single second, because missing any detail will leave you completely lost. Let us begin the breakdown. The federal government's aggressive decision to seize that 46-foot yacht tells us one major thing. Investigators are no longer waiting around for Brian Hooker to tell the truth. By dragging that massive vessel 100 miles south, away from Fort Pierce to a secure Fort Lauderdale facility, federal authorities have officially upgraded this missing person case into a high-stakes forensic lockdown. They are literally shrink-wrapping the entire boat to preserve every single microscopic fiber, fingerprint, and trace fluid from the destructive Florida weather. They are treating this luxury vessel exactly like a locked crime scene, safeguarding the evidence specifically for an upcoming criminal trial. Brian has not been hit with formal charges quite yet, but this high-level federal mobilization is a clear sign that prosecutors are quietly building a rock-solid case behind closed doors to guarantee a murder indictment. The timeline Brian gave to investigators is already completely disintegrating under intense scrutiny. He asserts that on April 4th, his wife Lynette somehow fell out of the back of their small dinghy while they returned to their yacht from the Abaco Inn. He told the officers that the wind was howling,
with waves crashing at 2 to 4 feet, and the current being too brutal for him to rescue her.
but local business owners and investigators simply aren't buying it. Photos taken at Aunt Pat's Bay at the exact moment Brian claims all hell broke loose reveal the water looking like a smooth sheet of glass. There were simply no crashing waves.
Surveillance footage from the Firefly Inn captures other small boats cruising
around effortlessly in perfectly calm, shallow water. This means Brian's terrifying storm story is an absolute lie, blowing a massive hole in his alibi. Making matters even worse was his highly suspicious behavior during the crucial hours right after his wife vanished, while local volunteers scrambled in the dark to find Lynette. Brian sat completely detached while search parties risked their lives scanning the pitch-black water. Brian Hooker was spotted sitting, lounging comfortably at the local conch inn, doing absolutely nothing to find his missing wife. He never joined the search boats. He did not pace the shoreline. He did not even bother scanning the horizon. Local resident Jim Todd spotted him there and offered him direct phone numbers to rent a private boat right away, so he could head out and search for Lynette himself. Brian acted interested, scribbled the numbers down, and pretended he wanted to help. But when Jim Todd followed up later, he discovered Brian never made a single call.
He never rented a boat, and he never even touched the water.
It was a calculated performance to look like a grieving husband for everyone watching him. Then comes the most chilling part of his entire timeline. By his own confession, Brian washed ashore at Marsh Harbor Boatyard at 4 a.m. on Easter Sunday, supposedly drifting helplessly for 9 agonizing hours. If you just lost your soulmate in the open ocean, your very first instinct would be to scream for help or call her family in absolute panic. But Brian did no such thing. He had a working cell phone right in his pocket, yet he never called Lynette's daughter, Carly. And he did not call her mother, Darlene, either.
Instead, he remained completely silent for 14 solid hours.
When detectives later demanded to know why he did not use his phone to call for help,
Brian looked them in the eye and offered a ridiculous excuse.
he claimed he could not call anyone because his phone lacked a local SIM card. But here lies the ultimate betrayal. Brian is no ordinary guy. He is a former United States Marine and a veteran AT&T phone technician. He spent his entire career wiring communications networks as a certified tech expert. He knew exactly how phones operate. As a veteran telecom expert, Brian knew very well that any mobile phone can bypass a missing SIM card to connect directly to local emergency services. The screen literally displays the words, "Emergency calls only," meaning he actively chose to stay silent while his wife was lost at sea. His 14-hour silence finally shattered on Sunday evening. But it was not because he suddenly felt guilty. At 5:51 p.m., the Royal Bahamian Police Force threw a massive wrench into his plans by releasing an official press statement detailing the missing American woman. Within minutes of that public broadcast hitting the news,
A panicked Brian finally dialed Lynette's mother, Darlene.
he did not call out of love or desperation. He called because his hand was forced, knowing the family would see the news online anyway. This calculated reaction shows an extreme consciousness of guilt, leaving local detectives convinced he was managing a cover-up. Oddly, his own sister somehow booked emergency flights and landed in the Bahamas, less than 48 hours after the disappearance, to pack up his belongings. While Lynette's daughter was kept entirely in the dark, Brian's sister was already being filmed by news crews, walking right beside him through Marsh Harbor while he clutched a mysterious yellow dry bag. This very yellow bag was the exact item he held when he first stumbled onto those boatyard docks at 4 in the morning. Now, local search teams are openly questioning how a man who supposedly survived a terrifying, chaotic shipwreck managed to keep that single dry bag safe while losing his wife and his heavy wooden oars. Even the official police press release exposes the deep confusion surrounding Brian's timeline. Responding officers noted that Brian claimed he departed from Hopetown to Elbow Cay. But the reality is that the couple was already staying on Elbow Cay, anchored right by the popular Abaco Inn. This geographical blunder proves the responding officers were entirely unfamiliar with these local waters, giving Brian a massive window to exploit their errors. He claimed he tried desperately to paddle toward his drowning wife, but one of his heavy wooden oars conveniently snapped right off its metal pin and drifted into the ocean. Yet local experts point out that the water where his dinghy supposedly failed was incredibly shallow, averaging only 3 to 5 feet deep. A trained United States Marine could have easily stepped right out of that boat, stood firmly on the shallow sandbar, and pulled his wife to safety instead of watching her drift away. Instead, Brian claims he just sat back and drifted 4 miles across the bay for 9 hours before hitting the Marsh Harbor boatyard. Local investigator Nathan went directly to that muddy shore where Brian claims he landed, testing the actual reality of his story. The actual terrain is an absolute nightmare, packed with thick, tangled mangroves, jagged limestone bluffs, and deep hidden ravines overflowing with heavy black sludge. It is physically impossible for anyone to cross that treacherous swamp at 4 in the morning without getting completely covered in thick mud. Yet when Brian walked into the bright lights of that secure boatyard, his clothes were remarkably clean, completely shattering his survival story. Even more suspicious, Nathan discovered a stray hat hidden deep within those isolated sludge pools that matches the exact gear Brian wore that weekend. Federal investigators from the elite Coast Guard Investigative Service are now treating those black sludge fields as a primary dumping ground for hidden evidence. They believe Brian deliberately used the cover of pitch darkness to bury the truth before fabricating his whole timeline. The trap is closing fast around him, and a formal murder indictment is now a
Matter of when, not if.